Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Welcome to the 7th webinar for local and regional governments towards COP25, prepared by ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability in its capacity as the focal point of the Local Governments and Municipal Authorities Constituency. My name is Yunus Arikan. Today, I will act as the moderator and the panelists, one of the panelists of this webinar. I'm happy to also announce that my colleague Carlos de Freitas from FMDV, co-director of the Global Fund for City Development, will also join us, especially at the session related to the Abu Dhabi climate meeting and the UN Climate Action Summit preparations, also in terms of our engagement in the Marrakesh Partnership. You may have noticed over the past years we have been enjoying to run these webinars with the support of my colleague Jisun Huang. I'm happy, and at least I'd like to inform you that she has now left ICLEI to pursue her professional career in a new direction. And through this opportunity, I'd like to thank Jisun once again for all her efforts. And we are confident that our roads will come across again in the field of climate, local governments, and advocacy. So today's agenda, we would start with some regular updates in case there are colleagues who are joined new, never heard. We can skip it very quickly. We would spend some time on the SB50, the UN Bonn Climate Conference that was held last week in Bonn. Some updates from resident cities, G20 and US climate mayors. There will be more emphasis on Abu Dhabi climate meeting, as we have mentioned, and we will conclude with additional highlights of the agenda towards the COP25. So that is our agenda for today. Let's recall we are now having a leadership between two presidency. The one who is in charge is the COP24 presidency Poland, led by Michal Kurtyka and Thomas Khrushchev as COP presidents and as special envoy, which are mapped or matched with the incoming COP25 presidency with Minister Schmidt and Mr. Munoz from Chile as the incoming or president designate or high-level champion. And this meetings that were held 2 weeks ago is just in the middle, so that it is a transition from Katowice track to Chile track. We all recall that we have been enjoying the outcome of the Talanoa dialogues over the past year, where we had mobilized significantly our constituency to a discussion on the climate action plans at the national level with impressive outcomes. And this, in fact, is feeding our strategy for 2019. We would primarily aim to implement the decision from Katowice, which encourages national governments to make use of the inputs and outputs of the Talanoa dialogue, particularly and very specifically addressed to the NDCs. So that's really a golden opportunity. We have an official mandate to use our engagement and experience from the Talanoa dialogues to approach our national governments and work with their delegations to make sure that there is new and more ambitious NDCs submitted by the latest 2020. Local climate finance is an important agenda. This year we have a standing committee on finance focused on sustainable cities. And of course, regardless of the negotiations, we will continue to mobilize our constituencies for ambitious climate action, in particular with the climate neutrality and which is the goal in the Paris Agreement. While these are the priorities of 2019, we all know our engagement consists of regular processes like showcasing our progress on climate action through our specific platforms or events or summits. We participate in consultations in the various workshops and Marrakesh Partnership. We also contribute in decision making, knowing that the final decision is in the hands of the national governments. We provide intervention for their view, and in particular, we have been working with the Friends of Cities over these years, which has now evolved into UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action. We are following a map or a calendar, which is as the first half of the year is over, we can definitely conclude that all the planned activities are taken up in a very ambitiously encouraging outcome as well. June was particularly busy as well, not just only the UN talks, but also our constituency had been particularly engaged in the G20 processes as well. We will just very briefly touch upon that. As expected in summertime, except the technical working groups for the Climate Action Summit or preparations for the regional climate action weeks, regional climate weeks, July and August is relatively smooth in terms of the number of meetings, but starting from September, we will have another crazy agenda. One thing let's not forget, since the European Parliament elections on the last Friday, there was a call for a global climate strike on the 20th of September. This aims to replicate the success of the climate awareness in how much this was achieved in the European Parliament, also similar impact to the UN Climate Action Summit. Obviously, this is not an election, and what we'll be having is an action summit, but raising the awareness and proving that the mobility of citizens, regardless of their age, profession, gender, and nationality, that everyone is demanding ambitious climate action, I think would be a powerful signal. And we as ICLEI will refer to our engagement in the Fridays for Future over the Residencies Congress, but we are encouraging our constituency, our members, to be actively involved in these processes as well. Regarding our engagement in the UN Climate Conference in Bonn, which is abbreviated as the SP50, the 50th session of subsidiary bodies, we had 7 main tracks. We had interventions at the opening and closing, which summarized our progress, but also raised our achievements and also formulate our expectations. There were a specific mandated event that, among so many of them, we were able to participate in the dialogue for action for climate empowerment. We had participated collectively in the Marrakesh Partnership consultations, which is now released. It's 2019-2020 2019-2020 work program, as now officially online. The research dialogue was important. We have together with the city's IPCC family or community, the first official presentation of the global research and action agenda on cities is now included in the UNFCCC agenda. That, of course, is an important achievement. This was a process over the past 3 years. Now, officially, the UNFCCC is aware that IPCCs have adopted this agenda, and by the 7th assessment report in 2025, we look forward to having a spatial report on cities, and the action agenda will hopefully feed into that. This is, of course, something that is a concrete progress. ICLEI also contributed the research dialogue with a poster on its own modalities or programs on supporting local and regional climate action. There was a number of side events. ICLEI hosted one side event with NDC partnership. SlowCat organized a transport focused partner side event, and we as ICLEI participated the side events of the 2 research institutions, DIE from Germany and United Nations University. We had a press conference by Climate Change Association announcing their engagement in Ghana in Africa. And the Climate Action Studio, we had 3 mayors, Izmir, Katbalu, and Recife. The first one is already online. The rest are following up soon. Of course, as you may recall from our updates from Bonn and also on the way towards the Bonn conference, our flagship agenda was the joint special joint event of COP24 presidency and ICLEI in collaboration with UN Climate Secretariat and supported by the Polish Alternative Fuels Association and the European Association of Electromobility. This was a special event. We believe have created a nice legacy. It was a special joint event in the sense that COP24 presidency had the nice strategy to have a follow-up from the initiative they have announced at Katowice. I think this is one of the first times such legacy is continuing. But when it comes to the specific actions on related to cities, we have already been also discussing the secretariat. So we thought it would be a nice opportunity where these two events could merge. And in fact, this was the structure of this event being a collaborative of ICLEI as in its capacity of the LGMA focal point and the COP24 presidency was a unique model. There were two other special events of the COP presidency, but the structure of this event was particularly unique for us. There is also, of course, this was on the agenda of the UN climate conference in Bonn, and for the first time, the concept of multi-level climate action is in the official agenda or official documents of the UN climate change the Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat. Of course, this is encouraging us because we now could comfortably say that the parties are interested to engage with this topic, and we are very happy to see a diverse participation from EU presidency, from Mexico, as well as interest from a number of other countries. There was around 50 representatives of subnational governments, including mayors and city and regional leaders. And we were also very happy to have additional contributions from parties like Senegal or Morocco, either online or in Germany also on site in the event. But there were also very active engagement of stakeholders, German Watch, Slocat, the transport community, and the COICA, the Indigenous People Network. This shows how the value of such a unique and a very innovative and interactive dialogue among the presidency, secretariat, and the parties help our conveying our messages to the UN climate community. In that sense, we also would like to express our really deepest appreciation to UN Climate Change Secretariat, not just only one delegation or one team, but conference affairs in terms of access to the venue, the observer liaison offices who has bridged us to the relevant teams, the Nairobi Work Program who worked with us on the adaptation, Marrakesh Partnership, of course, with all their leadership and staff, and the Communication and Executive Directive Management Office, Office of Patricia Espinosa. All of them have mobilized a huge support. This shows a huge respect to our constituency. As you can see or follow from the photos here, it was also a combination of a high-level session opening at the very prestigious Chamber Hall of the UN World Conference Center. This was followed by split up groups on adaptation and e-mobility. ICLEI led the mobilization of the adaptation workshop, whereas the COP24 presidency led the e-mobility sessions. And of course, we are very encouraged because we are seeing the incoming COP25 presidency. They're also addressing the same topics as their priority, and we hope this modality could inspire us for future engagements in Bonn every year, so that then we can feed into the COPs with the inspiration of the outcome of this discussion. We can go back home to the national governments, but also we can better prepare the COP agendas at the end of the year. Following that session inside the UNFCCC, Mayor of Bonn, in his capacity as President of ICLEI, also officially kicked off the UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action, which is an evolution from the Friends of Cities that was kicked off in 2013. In that sense, this was like a revised, refreshed engagement with national governments. This was already announced also at the ICA conference, one of the initiatives, and in fact, we are excited with the continuity of the many of the friends of cities in the before, but also newcomers as well. So we hope this would contribute to the future activities. As final remarks about what has happened over the past years of past month, Resilient Cities Congress celebrated its 10th year. Actually, the event in the UNFCCC was also very closely embedded with the structure of the Congress in terms of participation and the design. The Resilient Cities Congress also had made a unique discussion with Fridays for Future upon invitation of the Mayor of Bonn, and in fact, the urgency of action and the power of civil society and local governments as being the closest to their citizens was fully demonstrated in the Residents' Congress and in a concrete progress. This photo you see here is from the session closing plenary where Fridays for Future presented their call for action for the city of Bonn, and tomorrow City of Bonn Municipal Council is discussing the call from citizens for a climate emergency, and we hope these synergies will now prove concrete results, and we would be happy to follow up on the for the next years. ICLEI also has started to broaden the diversity, but also go in depth in terms of the efforts. And the next year's conference will have the hashtag of Urban Era for Life, which will be in parallel to the UN Climate Conference, but also overlapping with the 5th of June, the UN World Environment Day. During the month of G20, the outcomes of Urban 20 communique was presented to the Japanese Prime Minister, and in parallel process, when G20 ministers of environment and energy were meeting for the first time, the host region, Nagano Prefecture, also rolled out a call for a Nagano Declaration, and we're happy to see many of the elements in both of these efforts, Nagano Declaration and UN Urban 20 Communique, have relatively found their ways in numerous outcomes of the G20, either heads of states or ministerial outcomes. Over the last couple of days, U.S. climate mayors also convened their summit in Honolulu in parallel to the just ahead of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Summer Conference. This was a demonstration of additional action from the U.S. mayors. The number of mayors participating doubled compared to the previous year. They have launched a special initiative on electric buses, and they had a debate on finance, insurance, and philanthropy engagement. During the agenda of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we have also witnessed ambitious resolutions focusing on global compact on migration, climate, and energy, showing the leadership of U.S. Local governments in the national and global agenda. With this, I think it's time for us to give the floor to our colleague Carlos, who has been following the Abu Dhabi meeting. We have prepared 3 basic slides, and I would like to invite Carlos to take us particularly the engagement in Abu Dhabi. Carlos, the floor is yours. Carlos seems to be offline. This is, of course, what we were not prepared for. Maybe we can skip the agenda on Climate Action Summit for a couple of more minutes, and I continue with the rest of the slides, and maybe by that time Carlos comes back. So this is more on the way forward, in the sense that what is coming up over the coming years, months. The highlight, of course, is the regional climate weeks. We have completed one in Accra. Now the next one will be in Salvador, Brazil in August, and Bangkok, Thailand in September. They are very close to each other, and these were deliberately designed before the UN Climate Action Summit, so that these regional climate weeks could also create an opportunity of feedback from the regional actors, because the structure of the climate weeks are much more aligned with the 9 action tracks of the UN Climate Action Summit. There is several deadlines coming up, both in Salvador and for Bangkok. Throughout July, interested participants are expected to apply to inform the partner hosts about their interest to host side event, action hub, exhibition booths, and the knowledge corner. For the Bangkok, in addition, there is also a call for expression of interest to coordinate or support the sessions. That application was already, that deadline was already over for Salvador, so it is designed now, or it's being under negotiations, which organization will take the lead on supporting or coordinating the sessions. But the side event and action hub and exhibits and knowledge corner are all available. You can have the the links here, you can easily access to that. The deadlines are the next week or so. Both all the regional climate weeks have basically similar structures, that it starts with the 2 technical days and then continue with the 3 high-level dialogues or thematic dialogues. In the case of Salvador, the unique thing is that the city of Salvador is an official partner of this event, and they will present their climate change plan during the beginning of the first week. As you can imagine, there was back and forth in terms of convening this event in Salvador, and the city have particularly been very active in trying to convince both the national and the UN officials so that the meeting takes place. So we are excited to see the outcomes of the Salvador session. We can also address that Brazil is one of those governments who's contributed in the ICLEI track of the UN Climate Action Summit as well. Thailand agenda is also on the making. This will be hosted at the UN premises. I think the city of Bangkok does not have direct engagement, but obviously cities are still an ambitious agenda of the sessions as well. In July and September, New York, there will be an important agenda. There will be regular ministerial discussions on Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 13 will be discussed on 13th of July, SDG 13 on climate. Local and regional governments day will be held on 15th of July. It will be a combination of events at the One Millennium Plaza and the UN headquarters. That will be the day where they will be there will be a release of the inputs of local and regional governments to the HLPF through the Global Task Force report. And all these preparations will also follow up with the heads of state of SDG summits at the level of heads of states in New York on 24-25 of September. Now that we are on the COP25, but I see Carlos now is back. Maybe it is better we give a break and we go back to the UN Climate Action Summit and Abu Dhabi discussions. Carlos, are you able to now join?
Yes, I'm sorry, my connection is going and and coming back. Thank you. So sorry, did I miss something? Did you introduce the case?
No. Carlos, what we decided that I continued with the agenda after the Climate Action Summit or towards the Climate Action Summit. I mainly highlighted the regional climate weeks and the HLPF, and we kept this Climate Action Summit for you. So we are happy that you are back. So please, you can start how you wish to proceed. We have 3 slides, as you remember. Yeah.
Yeah, no, just I guess that everyone knows about the overall framing of the UNSG summit. So we were quite a strong delegation of international networks of cities and initiatives like JCOM, C40 was there, FMDV, UCLG was there also. The Abu Dhabi meeting was quite, let's say, confusing and chaotic in some ways. Basically, we had very little information, especially on, we have still very little information on what, especially on what other tracks are implementing and reflecting on all the initiatives that could emerge. We are supposed not to deliver too much and disclose too much on what's happening. For the overall setting of the meeting, it was clear that there was a strong call made by the UN SG team and also Secretary General Guterres to really take into account the climate crisis, to really go and be bold and step out of our comfortable zone, especially talking to countries, obviously. For the ICLEI track itself, what we can do is that it's a solid one in terms of coordination between the different topics. As you can see on the slide, You have three main chapters: net zero carbon buildings, decarbonization of transportation, and resilience, especially focused on the urban poor and communities, hotspots in slums. It's all based on the evidence, the narrative that the new 2019 Coalition for Urban Transition report will be bring to the table early September. Of course, you have a track on decentralized finance, which is cross-cutting to all these topics, and the subnational mobilization track that is obviously based on the continuity of the city networks advocacy to support this whole chapter of the UNSG summit. Basically, all the chapters have solid propositions. They are not as innovative probably as the UNSG team would like to, but I think that if you consider the atmosphere of the Abu Dhabi meeting, you will understand that there is somehow a certain fatigue in these mobilization and call for bold actions. You can really feel that all the teams coming from the countries, coming from the international organizations, have somehow reached their somehow limits in terms of delivering, following up with the agenda, and that's something I think we should really consider. And also another point that is important, I think, during the ICLEI discussions, during the synergies meeting on Monday, the synergies meeting, very important one, was to really cross the topics between the tracks to see where there would be some synergies and convergence, and what would that mean for all the tracks. It was a very successful meeting, especially for the ICLEI one, because there was real consensus on the role of the subnational governments in pushing harder the agenda on climate, and the recognition of their key role in the mobilization, in implementing, in having a follow-up and accountability on the commitments. So many references were made to all the city networks, to JCOM as an initiative. We had two mayors, Mayor Sefiani from Morocco and former mayor of Vancouver and ambassador for JCOM, Gregor former mayor of Vancouver, that took the floor several times to promote these perspective coming from the actions of the subnational. Yet you can feel that most of the teams representing the countries were very weak in the knowledge of what is actually happening in terms of initiative related to subnationals. So that's a very key point. They were all very happy to welcome the inputs coming from the city networks. They were all very eager to find somehow a way to build a joint narrative for the ICLEI track that gathers all these sub-tracks, buildings, transport, decentralized finance, and resilience for the urban poor. But we are still lacking the glue between these different chapters. So in the coming weeks, until end of July, I think that will be the hardest part of our work, which will be to find. Oh, you cannot hear me anymore, I think.
No, we can.
Hello?
We can. No, we hear you.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yes, so this is still the part that we are missing, the junction between all these subtracks and the specific narrative that we want to be presented during the UNSG summit. In terms of the UNSG summit itself, we know that during the weekend there will be somehow space to present all the initiatives that have been proposed. In certain tracks, they receive more than 150 propositions, for example. It's not the case for the ICLEI track because we know each other, so we made sure that we had some groups of initiatives. Still, there is a big question mark on what would be the form of the summit, what kind of announcement they are really expecting. And I think it's still, even for the UNSG team, still a process. They have, I think, a better idea now that the Abu Dhabi meeting has closed, and we'll probably hear more in the coming days. Another part, I think, that is important is that the most of the initiatives are not led by countries, and I think that's a key element too. You have a lot of development partners. You have a lot of international organizations promoting somehow or renewing some initiatives or programs that they have led in the past years. And you can find in some of the propositions countries that are supportive to these initiatives, but not leading countries. And I think that's also a strong signal, whether it's because of the lack of availability of human resources to follow all these parallel agendas, parallel to the UNFCCC process, I mean. But that's a big concern, I think, in terms of mobilization, in terms of announcements. Even though we had some clear, during the SB50, as you said, some clear messaging of developed countries that are pushing forward their agenda, but still it's not translated in most of the initiatives that were presented during the Abu Dhabi meeting for now. I think oh yes, and sorry, in terms of conclusions of the synergies meeting, I told about this will to get an overall narrative that would be a glue. One strong element that came as a conclusion was also the need for a structured dialogue between subnationals and parties. The form of this structured dialogue, how far we could get in the country-led somehow work stream, it's also a question mark, but it was raised several times in that meeting, so it's very interesting. I think it echoes the UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action that Yunus commented earlier. I think it's very interesting, and it was a specific push from Kenya and even Turkey, surprisingly, but still very interesting. And so we will see in the coming days and weeks if this lands on with some interesting proposition. And the other point was raised several times by the Kenya team, which was very numerous, is the question of affordability. All these discussions, all these propositions were felt like, yes, very relevant, very interesting, very well structured and organized, but not enough taking into account what it means in terms of costs, in terms of reaching the communities, and that was a very strong concern, and still once again a big question mark on what does it mean to review all these initiatives with that lens of affordability, of course the adaptation resilience lens coming from the global south. So I will probably stop here. On this, I can maybe comment afterwards. We had an informal meeting of the Marrakesh partnership, so I can also give some inputs, but maybe later.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Carlos. I think first of all, we appreciate your insights and frank assessments and also detailed, let's say, updates. I think 2 points are important from what I hear. Is first of all our collective strength that we have continued to lead in the UNFCCC process, but as a constituency, we were very active in Abu Dhabi and the initiatives, be it the special joint event with the presidency and secretariat or the follow-up dialogues are all feeding each other, and I think our message is consistent, diverse, and strong. So that was for me the most important thing. The second, in the agenda, I noticed later on that when every track has finished, because there were several leadership sessions, some high-level plenaries as well, but when there was a synergy session, one of the two topics was the cities. So it is also a very strong signal that nations are taking this issue seriously and they would like to advance. But I think everyone is trying to find its way. So it is I think positive signals overall. Let's see how much this would land in. And I think this is also good for us that immediately after the Abu Dhabi, we have the opportunity to inform our constituency and share so that we can still better make use of the next couple of days and months. So well, we have basically gone through the Marrakesh Partnership, especially regional climate weeks, but I didn't go too much into the Marrakesh Partnership. I mentioned that the work program is released. If you have any insights from your discussions during the Bonn conference for the first week, especially, the two champions were present for the first week together, high-level champions from Poland and Chile. There were both technical meetings, but also high-level meetings, especially with the champions. Mayor of Bonn also met two of them at the same time. So any insight additional from your side would be, of course, more than welcome.
Thank you, Yunus. Very quickly, it's just basically news. I think one key element that I forgot to mention, and I think it's not a secret anymore, the NASCA platform will be the platform to aggregate all the initiatives that will be proposed to the UNSG summit. So there is a clear recognition of this tool, of its revamping, and in very early September, I think that something will be put online that brings the momentum around the new generation of the NASCA platform. And I think that is a very good signal coming from the UNSG trying to connect the dots also on the tools that really can support action to take place. So that's a very strong signal coming from the UNSG office. Another thing is just that we were told, but still with precautions, that we will have tables, ministerial tables on transport, on energy, on finance, and maybe on agriculture. So Chile is really working hard in trying to organize these roundtables. This will be roundtables with ministries, but also with stakeholders. So obviously, subnationals will be probably present, and that's something that we should monitor in the coming weeks if they are all confirmed. And also the new narrative that was promoted also during the SB 50 on the MPJCA, on its tools, I think it will be strengthened, especially around the now called action roadmaps, who are a very nice revamping of the former action trackers. Impact trackers, sorry. And this really brings a new narrative around the global climate action agenda. And we can expect that Chile will be a key moment to renegotiate also the future of this chapter within the Paris Agreement, because you know the mandate of the champions will end in 2020. So I think that these two elements, the NASCAP revamp and put in light by the UNSG, and these ministerial tables, and a strong will to have a focus on the global climate action decarbonization agenda from Chile are very good signals too for our constituency. Thank you.
That's great. I think it was very nice of you that you mentioned both the NASCA and action roadmaps. In the NASCA, I think one of the things that is exciting us is that there will also be an some sort of a dialogue between the NDCs and the actions of the stakeholders that are on the NASCA. There are even discussions of having national chapters, as far as I know. So let's not share all the details, but I think if this all can be materialized, this can prove a powerful narrative that nations can be much comfortable if they can take up these initiatives or efforts into their NDC review process, which was a dream since many years, and I think we're getting there. The question is that we have to be faster. The good thing is that the NASCA was launched in a Latin American COP in Lima. Now in another Latin American COP in Chile, I think NASCA will prove that after 5 years it now serves in the best interest of all parties, UN, and the stakeholders. And it's good that you mentioned the agenda. That was my last slide, actually. We also had similar discussions about the timing or sequence of events. One of the unique things, because we had ministers of finance in the UN discussion, especially around Paris and others, and we also had seen different modalities of the heads of state being engaged. We had the Copenhagen case, we had the Paris case, and we had the Katowice case, which shows different purposes. And in the case of Katowice, the last example, that the heads of state was coming to the COP before or at the beginning, giving some political impetus and then leaving. We heard a similar timing and schedule can be held with the transport ministers. If this happens, this will be the first time transport ministers will be participating in a climate conference, and the other ministers, environment, climate, and possibly energy, will continue to come back again at the beginning of the second week. If this would be the case, and in the slide I'm showing once again the priorities of the COP25 presidency, electromobility is one topic. They are now connecting electromobility with renewable energies as well. So at least they talk to each other. But I'm not sure whether ministers of energy will be at the COP at the same time with the ministers of transport. And then there is a bunch of topics which is much more speaking to the focus areas of the ministers of environment or climate change, which is circular economy, ecosystems, biodiversity, oceans. Taking into account, if this would be the case, that there is a continuous question to ICLEI and all the others, all colleagues, what is our agenda in Chile? There may be a scenario where we may follow the suite, but this time we split our delegations into two, so that with a focus on their thematic, let's say, expertise, so that when ministers of transport are coming into town, we can organize an urban mobility event or urban mobility summit with the transport partners. And when the Minister of Environment comes in the second week, we can focus a bit more on circular economy, our achievements on different aspects like biodiversity, and the NDC specific discussion in the second week. And this could be a different group of leaders, because it's obvious that we cannot accommodate them for so long in a COP atmosphere. This may result in some logistical and financial consequences because travel is much more costly. But I feel that's what we have briefly discussed also with the champion as a last session we were having at the bilateral. We would discuss this with the Santiago de Chile, the presidency of the municipal regional government. There is a tendency that instead of a standalone local and regional summit, we get together more with the actors on the thematic topics, and the city of Santiago or the region of Santiago rather convince, like Katowice did, a protocol or a more high-level welcome session, not a political, not a negotiation session. That is tendency. If this works out, I think that could be an innovative way of engagement, and make sure that outcomes are in the most in line with our expectations. That was my last point to add. Actually, we're coming to the end, but it may still be good to open the floor for questions and answer. Carlos, if you don't have anything more at this stage, you can also contribute in the Q&A session as well. The floor is yours. You can raise your hand. You can type questions. You can unmute your microphone if you have additional points to raise or questions for clarification. If not, of course, as usual, we will make it available via video and links. I see Anthony from One Planet Channel WWF. Anthony, would you like to take the floor? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Yunus and Carlos, for a really interesting presentation. It's fascinating to hear firsthand on how things went in Abu Dhabi, and a little bit concerning, I suppose. But we'll see what happens in the next few days. I just have two follow-up questions for some things that I missed. One was the report that was mentioned that's coming out in September. I missed what that was. And also wondered whether you'd had any information about whether there was a U20 meeting planned for next year. I think Saudi Arabia is going to be a host of the G20.
Well, let me start with the simple one. The first one was much simpler. The Coalition for Urban Transitions is preparing a global report, which is almost about to finalize, and this will be the evidence base of why national governments should act on urban issues or cities and subnationals, local government, local regional governments. There are certain parts of this report presented in a number of events. For example, we had an event at the UN Habitat and we shared very basic highlights. I'm not sure how much of this report is now publicly available. ICLEI is contributing as one of the partners. We just had another steering committee meetings. We can highlight and we can ask if they can make their presentation available. We can add to this presentation so that complements our work. But it's basically providing the latest evidence on economics of net zero or low carbon action and how national governments can and should support or lead that. That was the easy part. The second part is a bit difficult. I was not in Urban 20. We have colleagues from C40. I'm not sure whether they would like to respond. I don't know whether there was any announcement. I didn't see that. We have Adrian Fenton, if he can maybe provide us a response. If not, I personally don't have any information on that. We should maybe wait for some updates from UCLG and C40 for next steps. And now Adrian is unmuted himself. Adrian, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything has been decided yet on the U20 with regards to Saudi Arabia. Obviously, there's long-term issues with Saudi Arabia's position on climate change. I believe that clearer guidance will emerge over the next couple of months over what can be done there. So sorry, right now I don't have any sort of concrete sort of way forward for you.
Okay, well, we'll stay tuned, and of course we'll share updates the more is available. I mean, let's remember all those were happening like one after each other. It was a madness. May and June was crazy. So let's give us some time and let's first reap the fruits of G20 in 2019. And then we'll come back to next year in the days ahead, I guess. Good, and Anthony also thanks from the question box. We can share with other participants. Once again, Carlos, maybe as a concluding remark, would you like to make some closing remarks?
No, two points. Sorry if my description sounded pessimistic. It's not. The Abu Dhabi meeting was quite interesting. It's a complex way of putting more emphasis on action, and I think that we are still at the very beginning of the process, even though it's a very short-term process, and we only have, I think, 80 days until the summit. But we felt in the whole setting of the event that there was a real will to go further and to go deeper and to have these junctions between the convergences, between the coalitions, initiatives, etc. But there is still again this kind of fatigue, this kind of hysteria, and extreme concerns about how we will be able to deliver. But it's also, I think, related to the kind of the profile of players that are composing the participants list. It's basically the same organization that we see in each kind of this event, and so I think it's also related to that. So let's see if we bring through the UNSG summit new players, new coalitions, new networks. And I forgot also to mention that in the ICLEI track discussions and the synergies discussion, interestingly enough, the planning part was a key element too. Many times parties, member states, let's say, raised the issue of the need for support to cities in planning, in reviewing the development plans at the local level to better integrate climate, and the lack of propositions in that field. I think that's also another key element that we can reflect on for the coming weeks, and to make sure that we have propositions matching this need. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carlos, for additional kind of clarification. The last point you raised, I think it's also important. As you remember, last month we had another webinar where we praised and commended the UN Habitat Assembly coming into power in the UN system as one of the newest bodies, and which is a strong one because it's universal. Together with the UN Environment Assembly, these are the two assemblies outside New York, and both of them are in Nairobi, and Kenya is hosting, and Kenya is also active in the co-leadership. So I think, and concerning UN Habitat providing the support to the ICLEI track, I think now stars are aligning that this urban and environment, urban and climate community will go hand in hand much carefully and much rapidly. This was also the signal at the Habitat Assembly. We had Frank Bainimarama, the president of the COP23, who stayed there for 3 days and contributed in discussions, or even 5 days. And we refer to the Talanoa dialogues, how cities have responded to the Talanoa of the COP23 presidents, the Fijian president. So it all gives us the chance that now the dialogue between urban and climate communities are much stronger. And this is giving us the hope that we would be much more faster if once these things are clarified, and that by 2020 there will be much robust, ambitious, both in the implementation and the vision. So that is our all hope, and we're happy that we are at least on the right direction. Probably we have to be faster, but there are limitations of capacity and staff, timing. But as I said, the signals are in the correct direction. With this, if there's no additional points, I would like to announce that we come to close to this round of our webinar. At 4 o'clock in the European summertime, we will have another round, and you can share this information with your colleagues, and they can also join that one if they need it. And thanks to all your interest, and we'll stay in touch.